Why is it that the most beautiful moments in life always seem to come when you least expect it? Even if you're lucky enough to capture those moments on camera, the pictures never really do it justice. Almost like some sick cosmic reminder that every single moment is temporary and fleeting. It's impossible to fully capture the magic of certain moments on camera, but it doesn't mean we can't try.
I said stop it!
I would argue that one of the greatest challenges of filmmaking is capturing how it actually feels to be there. It doesn't matter if it's a purely fictional narrative or a documentary of real events. The goal is complete immersion. There are all kinds of different tools and methods available to immerse the viewer in a scene, but just one of those many tools is the anamorphic lens. Many people know anamorphic lenses just for their lens flares. They have a very distinct and characteristic look to them, but those flares are really just a byproduct of the lens construction. Anamorphic lenses are built specifically to take in more horizontal light than they do vertical light. So this aspect ratio that you're seeing now isn't just some creative cropping choice. This is what the lens actually sees. This is the Sure Iron Star 35mm 1.5 anamorphic lens. So it's a 35mm lens, but the width that you're seeing is more equivalent to what you would get on a 24mm spherical lens. But that doesn't mean that you can just film on a 24mm lens, crop it to this ratio, and get the same effect. By using this anamorphic lens, you still get the compression of a 35mm lens. You don't distort faces the way a 24mm would, but you still get this wide perspective. None of that is to say that this is the optimal aspect ratio. They all have a time and place and convey different feelings, but I'm personally a big fan of anamorphic lenses and this aspect ratio because to me it feels incredibly immersive. It feels easy to get lost in images like these. So that's kind of an overview of anamorphic lenses in general, but I want to share some thoughts specifically on these Iron Star lenses. As far as usability goes, I feel like I should be very clear about the fact that I am not picky when it comes to gear, and I tend to be very good at just adapting to what I have and making do with whatever I have. Case in point being, I have been using the same ball head Joby mount on my tripods for as long as I have been making videos. You should not use a ball head to make videos. It doesn't make sense. It sags down a little bit after I set my camera on it. You can't do pans or follows or anything like that. But that's what I've had. I've made do with it. It doesn't bother me. So bear that in mind that with these lenses, there may be glaring annoyances or things that might bother certain people, but not much really bothers me with gear. So I'm going to tell you about the things that I really liked about them. These are built extremely well, just as far as how they feel. Full metal construction, really nice feeling focus and aperture rings. It feels like it is going to last the test of time and just be like a super workhorse piece of gear, which also means that they're heavy, but not heavy enough to feel like I didn't want to be carrying them around on my back all day. So that enabled this really unique ability to kind of adopt this street photography documentary style method of using these lenses. Even though they have a very unique look to them, they still always felt pretty low key when I was using them. If I had a full on rig with a matte box and all of this stuff, probably would have been a different story. The only problem I ran into that isn't really even a problem is that I had a hard time finding an ND filter option for these lenses. They have a 95 millimeter exterior, which is just the standard matte box size. So really this is perfect for what they're intended for. As a cinema lens, you would expect to be putting a matte box on it. But I didn't want to be running around doing this street photography style with a giant matte box on my camera. So I would have preferred to just use a threaded ND filter, but the thread size on these is 92 millimeters, which maybe I missed something, but I had a really hard time finding a 92 millimeter thread ND filter. I had a hard time finding a step-up ring to a different size. So basically, I just didn't use an ND filter at all for any of these shots. I either cranked the aperture down or I cranked the shutter depending on what the shot was. These lenses come in a PL mount, but they also come with a user swappable EF mount. So you have the freedom to swap between either of those mounts. I used PL mount and adapted that to my Sony E mount on the FX3, which I recently saw there is actually a PL to E adapter that has drop-in ND filters in the back of it. So that could be a good option. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about just the actual results. The image that comes out of these lenses, I would classify as a clean, classy, responsible anamorphic look. And the reason I say that is because a while back I was also able to test out the Blazar Remus anamorphic lenses, which probably are most comparable to these Sirui ones in price point and all of that. But those Blazar lenses have such dramatically different edge distortion. The lens flares go crazy. When you move it around, the whole frame feels like it's warping. Those lenses have a very dramatic, very obvious stylistic feel to them. Whereas these Iron Stars, they feel more clean, that they don't feel as dramatic and crazy. I never felt like the distortion on these was super noticeable or distracting, but there is definitely a little bit of pincushion distortion. The Iron Star comes in either a blue flare or a neutral flare. My personal preference is the blue flare, and I think I have solid reasoning for it. I feel like people will choose the neutral flare thinking that it's going to be less distracting and less dramatic than the blue flare. But in my opinion, the neutral flare, to me, it kind of looks like how it looks when you point an iPhone at the sun and you get these random streaks across the screen. To me, the neutral flare looks more unintentional. It looks more accidental and a little more messy. Whereas when you get the blue flare, it has that classic anamorphic look that you see it and you know it. It looks intentional. Whereas to me, the white flare looks a bit more accidental and messy. Obviously, that's totally just my opinion. That is yet another subjective point in this discussion. But with that said, the flares on these lenses are still very controllable. There were plenty of scenarios where I thought I had a very harsh light source directly at the camera, but there was still almost no flare appearing. It was really only when I had a direct pointed harsh light source at the lens that I would get extreme lens flares. But for the most part, They're very subtle, very tasteful in my opinion, and contribute to this being the responsible anamorphic lens. Until I used these lenses, I had never really put much thought into how a lens can affect the colors of an image. And it's not something I can really explain. I don't have any data or anything to put to it. All I can tell you is that the colors that came out of these iron stars are so unique compared to any other look I've gotten from Sony G Masters and from Sigma lenses and from vintage lenses. Can't really explain it. I can't put my finger on exactly why it is, but these lenses just produce really good looking colors. I believe Sirui still has plans to release 3 more focal lengths. Currently, there's only a 35, a 45, and a 60, and they're planning to still release a 75, a 100, and a 135. So I think those would be super interesting to see as well, because there's not that insane of a difference between the 35 and a 60, but it would be very interesting to see what this looks like at something like 100 or 135 millimeter focal length. So I really enjoyed these. I love the image that comes out of them. They were fun to use, and that's about all I have to say about them.